Hi everyone, my name is Søren Pihlmann, and I am the director of Pihlmann Architects, situated here in Copenhagen, Denmark. And I put together a presentation here which will hopefully give you an introduction to our methodology, the way that we work, as well as a selection of one of our recent projects, some of our recent projects. But I think, like, in order to understand the way we work, we have this way of approaching almost all projects, which is about trying to understand the materials that we work with. And I think most people here at the office, we really share this this fascination about how we treat our resources. And we like to see how we can go back as much to like the initial conditions, the raw resources. So sometimes we are going on these field trips to various production facilities just to see like how do they cultivate our resources in order to produce our building components that we use. And we are very much fascinated about looking into each step of these processes to try to see how does each step influence the final product, and how does each step set its mark so that you, in the end, hopefully will be able to unravel some of the former processes in the final building components. Because we think there is a lot of poetry, and there's a lot of quality in materials' ability to talk about their past, like to tell stories about themselves. So we lately moved more and more into only working with existing buildings, because we thought, like, after I have been trying to do quite a significant amount of new builds, like smaller residential buildings, we thought there was something like more interesting about working with the existing, because everything that we were working with kind of like had this unique ability to tell a story about its former past. And I think the more that we've dived into this, the more we have developed our method, which on all levels is really about finding value in the existing environment. So we tested this out in a small transformation project we did for some years ago for an art institution here in Copenhagen. They moved into this space that you can see here to the right, it's actually part of the meatpacking district, but it used to be a bank facility that was located in this space. And then we just started to demount all the things that we found in here, just because we wanted to create this archive. We wanted to see what is present in the space, and we wanted to evaluate all the things that we found in many different ways, like both technically, how much do we find of it, like what is the numbers, but what are the aesthetic qualities, and what could it be used for? So we tried to like really flip the design process around. So instead of having a concept that we are bringing into a certain space, and then we wanted to go into that space and just dive into the things that we found and see how that could form a concept on its own. So this was what the space looked like before we made the intervention, and this was what it looked like afterwards. So what we were doing here was that we took down these suspended gypsum panels from the ceiling. We created these tracks that we mounted in the ceiling, and turned these former gypsum panels into these foldable walls or curtains in order to create this flexible exhibition space, which were what they wanted. And actually, as I'm speaking right now, they just turned this meeting space back to its original position, because part of the concept was that they knew they were only going to be here for a shorter period of time. Now they have had it for 3 years, two or 3 years, and now they had to hand it over to the landlord again. And in the contract, it said that they had to deliver it in the same state as when they took it over. So now it looks like the picture to the right again. So it's been for a short period of time, but we really just introduced very few materials. We introduced the tracks that you can see in the ceiling. We introduced some key rings that are connecting each of these gypsum panels, but we didn't destroy anything. We took some of the glass partitions down, turned them into temporary furnitures, and so forth. Then, for some years ago, uh, the office here was asked by, at that time, the curator of the Danish pavilion in Venice, Marianne Krogh, to contribute to her anthology, which was like a publication she did in tandem with the exhibition in Venice. And she wanted us to reflect on the theme of the term home. And we thought this was a great opportunity for us to actually have a more critical look at our own project. So we decided to build some scale models in scale 1 to 6 of some of our, at that time, just recent built projects. But instead of only looking at the home and the quality of home, we decided to, like as a working title, to call it home minus 12 mil, which is the approximate thickness of a gypsum board. And then we just built these models by removing 12 millimeters of all surfaces. And what you see, which of course is not a big surprise for anyone working in the construction industry, we're starting to reveal all the things that is just behind the surface. And all these things that we are revealing, this is where we want architecture to derive from. This is what we think is or should be the starting point in all discussions about architecture, which is actually comes down to that each element has a certain function and each element has a certain aesthetic quality. And this is what we would like to work with. So what you see is everything from vapor barriers, insulation to heat distribution plates in the flooring. And of course, in this case, it's also, you could say it's also quite like a critical look at our own project, because we at that time were trying to convince ourselves that we were building in a very honest way. We were only using the materials that was needed, but of course, due to regulations and stuff, we would have to clad it all in gypsum boards in the end. But I think this is on many levels showing kind of like a dream scenario for us to only work with these things where suddenly like cables and installation become part, like a crucial part of the architecture. So then recently, or like actually it's almost 2 years ago, it is 2 years ago now, I was appointed as the curator for this year's uh, Architecture Biennale in Venice. And so I and the office, we started to approach this project by first just looking at the framework, or like looking at the building itself where we were supposed to set up an exhibition. So without having a clear idea of what we wanted to do, we just started to dive into this building. We started to do measurements of it. We collaborated with various people that we were fascinated about, like that had specific working methods that we thought we could learn something from. So these digital drawings was made in collaboration with the architecture school here in Copenhagen. So we were 30 students going down there, and we went there together with them, and we then measured everything in the building. Then, together with a team from Switzerland, we went there and started to do holes in the pavilion just to see what this pavilion consists of. And I think during our on-site analysis, of course, we were also looking into the history of the pavilion, and we found out that there was a report for some years ago, I think it was in 2016, saying that there was some significant issues with this pavilion and they wanted to upgrade it. One of the biggest issues was that half of the pavilion's floor was cast without any rebars, so it was cracking many places. And in that half part of the pavilion, it was also cast lower than the rest of the building. And that has resulted, and it is resulting twice or sometimes 3 times a year, where half of the pavilion is being flooded because of the water, the heavy waterfalls during fall in Venice. So we thought this was a great opportunity to maybe just to shed light on the pavilion, and hopefully at that point we hope that we could contribute with a real, like, permanent upgrade of the pavilion, and thereby bringing focus to how important it is that we're treating our buildings better, that we are spending more time in preservation and caretaking of the existing. But then at the same time, we use this as an opportunity to keep all the building waste that we produce as part of this process on the site, and just analyze it and look into what are the potentials of these building waste. How can we utilize that in various purposes? So we went there, we did all kind of analysis of the existing. We started to structure everything that we developed or we got, and we pooled them into each of these categories of gravel and silt, clay, stone, etc. We're starting to do analysis of them together with material specialists, both from Copenhagen University and from the Danish Technical University. So we could start to make simulations and X-rays and various types of scannings of these composites and stones and materials that we found. And from there, we could go even deeper into it, started to do simulations that could tell something about what are the material properties, the tensile strength, compression strength, and so on. So this was really just about diving deep into the materials that we found on site without really knowing what we wanted to use it for. We also did a lot of scans together with the Danish Technical University of the existing concrete, the concrete that we knew we were about to remove in order to do a new flooring half the pavilion. And then, based on their knowledge, we could also start to cut this existing concrete slab into elements because we, through their scannings, we could see where there were cracks, where there were some parts, there were some small rebars, some of it was broken, some of it was cast very thin, some of it was more thick. All these layers of information we could get from the scanning tools that we used together with the people from the university. So then we started to have an understanding of what was present, and we could harvest all these materials and turn them into valuable components. And like this is the layer of information that we could actually gather from these reports. Like we could really see something about the quality, the robustness of the concrete, where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths. And we wanted all these layers of information to be our guiding principle in the development of the concept of an exhibition. Like how much could we learn from the existing? That was really our initial idea. Of course, after we then have harvested most of these bigger components, we still had a lot of building waste. So we found a lot of broken bricks as a like landfill underneath the existing slab. We're starting to cross them, testing out various types of casting methods together with a postdoc and a PhD from Copenhagen University, who was at that time doing research in bio-based candidates that in the future hopefully could work just as good as cement, but as a substitute for cement. So we were trying and testing out with both alginate and gelatin and sodium, a lot of different candidates. And then we were doing research, again, as part of this ongoing research at the university on these composites that we developed. And we could look into how the adhesiveness of the binder together with the aggregate we found outside, how they worked together and how they didn't work together. And we were starting to do compression tests, and we were again doing tensile stress tests just to find out what could be a proper candidate in this case. We started to do castings again with the materials that we found there on site in Venice. So it was really just, it was an ongoing investigation. It was a big laboratory where we just tested things out just to see how far could we actually get by taking our starting point in everything that was present on site. And then we started to build up an exhibition. So these tabletops you can see here, they actually cast of silt and sand that was stuck up in the pavilion mixed together with gelatin. We created this long table where you can see that the bottom part, like the base, is actually rammed earth blocks from the earth that we excavated as part of this renovation. The middle parts are the concrete slabs that we cut up. Then we have these spanning beams on top of the concrete, which are sodium alginate mixed with silt and sand. And then we have the tabletops, as I mentioned at the end. And here in the middle, we actually also have some of the natural stones that used to be part of the existing floor. So this whole space was just turned into this showcase and like an open laboratory that people could dive into, and they could see like all the materials and how much material there actually is within our existing built environment, which was the overall idea here was really to show how much we actually already have, that we don't necessarily always need to go out and build new. We can just see, but try at least to reconfigure our existing built environment. So like the final result of this exhibition is this in between state between like what it used to be and what it is in this exhibition period and what it might become in the future. So in this situation, for instance, you're entering through a ramp, which is the one you see to the left, which where the guardrails is cut out of the former concrete. The floor that you're walking on the ramp is also part of the old concrete. As soon as you move into the pavilion where the picture is taken here, it's the excavated earth underneath that we have compressed, polished, sealed with wax. So you're actually just walking on the earth that was already there. You will find some of the old windows, which are like halfway in this position where they're being renovated right now. This former window that was at the end of the corridor, together with some local skilled carpenters, we turned that into a pivot door because we've seen over the years for the last many exhibitions that either the artists or the architects exhibiting in the pavilion, they wanted to either close this hallway or they wanted it to stay open. So now we just turned this existing window into a pivot door, which will permanently stay there. And then we also have a sample of what the future floor is going to look like, where we use all the existing stones that was on the former floor and all the existing stones that we managed to get up in whole. We will reuse them directly. The ones that will break, or the ones that did break, we're going to cross them even more, and then we're going to cast a new terrazzo floor, as you can see in this sample. So this is this was the exhibition, and I think like this is also, since it is an exhibition, it's more like a statement or an idea that we are trying to come up with like a physical manifestation of. But we are right now in an ongoing process of using this way of utilizing all the things that we find in the places that we built. But we also recently did a full-scale building here in Copenhagen, where we turned a former factory building from the late 60s, the one you can see here, which is around 6,500 square meters. We turned that into a community center, more like a cultural building, together with the Danish foundation Bikubenfonden. And in this project, it was really also just about showing and demonstrating how we can utilize and how we can be better at finding value in the existing. So this is what it looked like before we started the intervention. This was what it looked like for a year ago or so, slightly later. And actually, what's important to notice here is that almost all the things that you see in the picture to the right is already present in the picture to the left. So like the opening, of course, is we are cutting away concrete, but the concrete we are cutting away, we are utilizing that, reusing it for these structural like ramps that you can see that are spanning now from one floor to the other, which is the foundation for the future stair that is going to connect all the 4 floors in the building. And this became our guiding principle throughout the whole building, like how much value could we create just by reusing the existing things that was in the building. But before we came that far, we, as in many other projects, started to just remove or peel off the layers of the buildings that we knew was important to peel off. There was an environmental report, there was some heavy metals in some of the paint, so we came up with a strategy for that, a way of removing the old vinyl floors where there also was some glue that was problematic. And slowly we just we removed the materials, but none of the materials we threw out. Of course, there was some of the sand that we used for the sandblasting, which is toxic after, that has to be treated in a certain way. But all the materials that we were able to keep, we kept them in the basement. So we were starting to collect all these materials, put them into each like separate categories, and without even knowing what to use them for, just because we thought it was important to be true to our own ideas here, and that we should keep all the things on site and reevaluate it later on. But I think, again, coming back to the concrete elements, which is also the most prominent and dominant feature, like architecturally in this building, it really played a role that as soon as we convinced people around in the whole team that this is not waste anymore, that these concrete elements could actually be reused, it just did something to the whole process that suddenly like the construction site itself became our building market. Like we could walk around, and these special brackets that you see here in the floor, they were made in order to keep the the pre-force suspension, which is through the rebars in the existing concrete elements. And you start to have these laminated panels like on the floor directly. So when you're walking around in the building, in the construction process, you could actually see that, okay, now I'm walking on what's going to be a future stair. Now I'm walking on what's going to be a future table or something else. Like there is something about the perception of the building that changed quite dramatically as soon as we wanted to reuse as much of it as possible. Then we went into this whole cutting process, use many different types of tools depending on where in the building we were to extract the material and what it should be used for afterwards. Slowly hoisting all the slabs down to the ground floor where they were positioned for a while. And then we actually we started to develop this whole new project within the project because we actually to begin with we thought that that we would break a lot of these concrete elements, but we found out it was actually quite easy to keep them intact. So we came up with this new strategy of reusing all the surplus concrete elements for various types of furnitures. And then we started to develop these furnitures based on the load bearing capacity of each of the existing levels, because just like a single of these TT slabs weighing around 6 or 7 tons. So it easily gets very heavy when we want to, for instance, stack two of them on top of each other. But then we developed different types of categories depending on where in the building they should be placed. Um, then we're starting to cut them up, process them in the ground floor. And of course, this is also changing the whole logistics of the construction site because you are keeping it all there. Things are not being delivered when you need it. You have to come up with a planning strategy for the construction site that are taking into consideration that you have a lot of tons that you don't want to move around too much. Then we mounted all the brackets, the joints, the extra steel element that was needed in order for this to work. And then slowly we were starting to hoist these elements back into position from the ground floor where they were positioned and putting them into these elements. And this is like very high tolerances, and which is of course quite difficult when you're working with existing components, which are really like some of them have like a broken corner and stuff like that, and then you have to position them very precisely afterwards. But we managed to do it, and now this single feature, which required quite a lot, both in the execution, but especially also in the planning and the calculation part. But it also plays a very crucial role for this building because even though that doesn't take up many square meters of the overall building, it's an architectural motif that you'll see everywhere from when you enter in the ground floor, from there up to the first floor, and from the first floor to the second floor. And it's visible from anywhere where you are in the building, so you very easily understand the concept. And these are some of the final photos that was taken after the building was done in the beginning of this year. And then the same idea, we tried to test that out on the facades. So we came up with a strategy where we're just cutting away this lower partition wall under these existing windows, and then flipping it down to form like a pavement area on the outside. So again, like as you see here, we actually did it on both sides of the building, both on the outside towards the public street, but also on the inside in this technical facade, where we're reusing the former facade bricks, but for the pavement. And again, some of the final photos that was taken inside the building, and here you see again the bricks in the floor. But then I think we came to a point where we realized this is also a question of scale. Like it's not because you can, or at least it's difficult to find value in everything, because at some point things are just getting too broken. Like when you start to look at old duct pipes and cables and broken wooden elements like that are very small. Like how do you actually find an aesthetic quality in that? And we were trying to come up with many different strategies to do that, but it's very difficult for us. But at some point, we also just accept that maybe we will have to do something differently. So what we did here was after we collected all these materials and kept them on site, for the wood, for instance, we started just to shred it up. So we took all these components in various sizes and turned them into smaller particles like fibers and shafts in various sizes. And together with a supplier in Jutland, we then started to do new boards where we tested all kind again of binding agents to like see how does that behave together with the wooden waste from the construction site itself. So we tested out that first together with Technological Institute and later on with that supplier in Jutland. And ultimately, we managed to produce our own particle board based of all the wooden construction waste that was produced as part of like the demolition phase in the building and as part of the construction phase. And then these new particle boards, they became our starting point and our guiding principle for all the new furnitures that we were about to build in the building. So we started to come up with new like assembling strategies to use the thicknesses that they came in. And then we produced these tables and we shelving systems, benches, a lot of different types of furniture throughout the whole building. And in this case, we actually also had some extra concrete leftover, so we use them as the base for this table. And some places the building we're only using concrete, but it really just became this interesting, I feel, um, project where we allowed ourselves to stay open as long as possible to just revisit the material pools that we gathered throughout the process. We also had a lot of steel, some of it, like the lamps, for instance, that worked. We were just retrofitting and using the lamps again in the building. But again, coming back to some of the materials that didn't have any specific value or quality, at least that we could find, we were looking into other types of strategies that were more playful. So we made a collaboration with like this junkyard where we were compressing all the waste metal that we found on site from old radiators to ducts and pipes and profiles. And then we turned them into these blocks that we sandblasted and waxed afterwards. And these blocks were used then again for furnitures around the buildings for various purposes. And I think this is also where, at least as I see it, all the things we're doing is kind of like being combined in a way, because this is on many levels both a question of finding value in the existing as well as exposing the existing and letting the final architectural statement develop itself based on all the necessary components. And I feel like we're still looking into this method. We're still developing in it, and we have a lot of different projects now where we try to see how can we go even deeper into the existing, and how can we make the material that are present the authors of the architecture that we do. So I hope this was introduction enough, and you're always welcome to reach out if you want anything else. Thank you very much.